Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the English Daily Book Summary YouTube channel. In order to not stop learning, listen to an English book summary every day for free.
Parker J. Palmer, The Courage to Teach. Exploring the inner landscape of a teacher's life. What makes a teacher truly effective? Is it their expertise in a subject? Their perfectly structured lesson plans? Or could it be something deeper, something personal? In The Courage to Teach, Parker J. Palmer argues that great teaching goes beyond mastering methods or delivering content. It's about bringing your authentic self into the classroom, embracing your vulnerabilities, and forming genuine connections with your students. At its core, it's about the courage to show up fully in those pivotal moments when you stand before your students. Every day, educators wrestle with self-doubt, fear of failure, and the immense responsibility of shaping young minds. But rather than viewing these challenges as roadblocks, Palmer suggests they are opportunities to build trust, foster meaningful relationships, and create transformative learning experiences. In fact, allowing yourself to teach less perfectly can often result in more powerful and impactful teaching. This blink dives into the inner landscape of teaching, revealing how courage and authenticity are the keys to becoming not just a better educator, but a more fulfilled one. Whether you're navigating burnout or simply curious about the deeper meaning of teaching, the insights ahead will inspire you to reconnect with your purpose and lead with integrity. So, let's explore how teaching from the heart can transform not just your classroom, but your entire approach to education. The personal is professional. Your identity shapes every moment that you spend in the classroom, whether you realize it or not. It influences how you respond to questions, how you handle challenges, and even how you arrange your learning space. When you try to separate your personal self from your teaching self, something vital is lost. That spark of authenticity that makes learning come alive. Think about this. Teaching is fundamentally an act of human connection. When you step into your classroom, you're not just delivering information, you're creating a space where minds and hearts can meet. This means that your effectiveness as a teacher doesn't just depend on your knowledge or techniques, but on your willingness to be genuinely present and real with your students. This was true for June, a high school physics teacher who once struggled to maintain a stern, authoritative presence because she thought that's what good teachers do. But her true passion for scientific discovery only began to spark her students' interest when she let her natural enthusiasm shine through. Her eyes would light up explaining the poetry of particle physics, and suddenly her students started seeing science differently. This truth extends far beyond subject expertise. Your personal experiences, interests, and even struggles can become powerful bridges to student understanding. When Aisha, a veteran elementary teacher, brought her love of gardening into her math lessons, her students didn't just learn fractions through plotting garden beds. They absorbed her patience, attention to detail, and respect for growth processes. To strengthen this connection between who you are and how you teach, start with small steps. Notice which lessons energize you and which drain you. Pay attention to moments when teaching feels effortless. These are important clues to when you're most aligned with your authentic teaching self. Then, gradually let more of these natural strengths shape your teaching style. When you're ready to take action, choose one aspect of your identity, your curiosity, your sense of humor, or your love of problem solving, and intentionally weave it into tomorrow's lesson. Watch how students respond to this glimpse of your genuine self. Like Jamal, who shared his own struggles with learning English as a second language, you might find that your personal story becomes a motivating tool for student empowerment. Teaching from your true self isn't about perfection or performance, it's about presence. When you bring your whole self to teaching, you create a learning environment that invites students to do the same. This mutual authenticity builds trust, deepens engagement, and transforms ordinary lessons into meaningful experiences of shared discovery. The emotional dimensions. Fear is a constant companion in teaching, though it's rarely discussed openly. Every time you face your class, you're taking an emotional risk, hoping your lesson will connect and that students will engage. These fears aren't signs of weakness. They're natural responses to the profound responsibility of shaping minds. Understanding your teaching fears can transform them from barriers into bridges. When you acknowledge your anxieties about appearing imperfect or losing control, you begin to see how these same fears might be holding your students back as well. This recognition creates space for a more honest and supportive learning environment overall. In this way, your vulnerability in the classroom isn't a flaw to fix, but a strength to cultivate. Like Rajesh, a first-year math teacher who initially tried to project unwavering certainty. When faced with a challenging student question, he learned that admitting he needed to think about the answer actually increased his students' trust and willingness to tackle difficult problems themselves. The fear of judgment can feel especially intense in teaching moments. Yet when Sophia, a music instructor, openly shared her process of learning a new instrument alongside her students, something remarkable happened. Her willingness to be a visible learner transformed her classroom into a space where mistakes became stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. To work through teaching fears, start small. Identify one specific anxiety that frequently arises. Perhaps it's the fear of silence after posing a question. Instead of rushing to fill the void, try pausing and counting to 10, reframing the silence as a moment of reflection rather than discomfort. These small experiments can help you navigate fear rather than avoid it. Also, notice how your relationship with fear influences those around you. Keisha, an experienced teacher nervous about parent conferences, found that embracing her anxiety as natural rather than shameful made parents more willing to share their concerns. Her authenticity built trust, creating more productive conversations. Working with fear requires patience and self-compassion. Start each day by reminding yourself that perfect teaching isn't the goal, meaningful connection is. When challenging moments arise, take a deep breath and remember that your vulnerability might be exactly what your students need to see. By embracing the emotional dimensions of teaching, you create a classroom where both struggle and success are honored parts of learning. Your courage to face teaching fears with openness doesn't just make you a better educator, it shows your students how to approach their own challenges with dignity and grace. Subject-centered teaching. Imagine your classroom as a circle, with your subject at the center. You're not just passing knowledge to your students. Instead, you and your students are gathering around the subject together, each bringing unique perspectives to understand it more deeply. This approach transforms teaching from a one-way transmission into a shared exploration of ideas. Traditional teaching often positions you as the sole expert, but subject-centered teaching invites everyone to contribute to understanding. When you step aside and let your subject take center stage, something remarkable happens. Your students begin to engage directly with the material, rather than simply trying to please you or earn a grade. Consider how Yuki transformed her literature classroom. Instead of lecturing about theme and symbolism, she began asking students what questions the text raised for them. Their diverse perspectives revealed layers of meaning she hadn't considered before. The text became a living thing they explored together, rather than just material to be mastered. This approach works across all subjects, too. In Carlos's chemistry lab, experiments became collaborative investigations where students' observations and questions drove discovery. Even when experiments failed, the class learned valuable lessons about scientific inquiry and problem-solving. The subject itself became the teacher, with Carlos guiding rather than controlling the learning process. To shift toward this teaching style in your own classroom, start by examining your relationship with your current subject. What drew you to it initially? What still excites you about it? This genuine enthusiasm creates space for students to develop their own authentic connection to the material. Then begin your next lesson by posing a genuine question that you're curious about. When Amara asked her geography students to help her understand why certain cities develop where they do, their collective exploration led to insights that surprised everyone. The subject came alive through their shared curiosity. This approach requires trust in yourself, your students, and the teaching process. It means being comfortable with uncertainty and requires a willingness to follow unexpected paths of inquiry. When Zara let her math students explore different ways to solve equations, some discovered methods she hadn't considered before. Their excitement at contributing new understanding energized the entire class. Remember, subject-centered teaching doesn't diminish your role as an educator. It simply transforms it. You become a guide instead of a lecturer, helping students form meaningful relationships with the material. This approach fosters deeper, more lasting learning because students aren't just receiving knowledge, they're discovering it for themselves. The troubled classroom. When your students are quiet or seem disengaged, it's easy to assume they're uninterested in learning. But take a step outside your classroom during break time, and you'll likely see these same students alive with energy and ideas. This stark contrast reveals an important truth. Student engagement isn't just about the students. It's about the learning environment teachers create. Think about how your assumptions shape your teaching. If you expect students to be passive recipients of knowledge, you might unconsciously create conditions that encourage exactly that. When you shift your perspective to see students as naturally curious beings, you start noticing opportunities to tap into their innate drive to learn. Take Priya's experience with her history class. Initially frustrated by their apparent apathy, she noticed how animated her students became during informal discussions before class. Instead of fighting their energy, she redesigned her lessons to harness it, turning historical events into scenarios where students could actively engage with different perspectives and outcomes. The transformation often begins with simple changes. When David noticed one particularly disconnected student in the back row, rather than focusing all his energy on getting that student to engage with him, he began creating opportunities for peer interaction. By incorporating brief partner discussions, he found that even his most withdrawn students gradually began contributing to class conversations. And consider your classroom space itself. When Lynn rearranged her science classroom to facilitate group work rather than passive listening, she noticed immediate changes in student engagement. Even small adjustments to seating arrangements can signal to students that their active participation matters. Here's a practical step to get started. Start your next class by observing your students' natural interactions for a few minutes before beginning formal instruction. What energizes them? How do they naturally share ideas? Then look for ways to incorporate these patterns into your teaching style. Remember that challenging classroom dynamics often reflect teaching methods rather than student capabilities. When Hassan switched from lengthy lectures to shorter, interactive segments in his math class, even his most resistant students began showing signs of interest. The key was creating conditions where students could experience the subject directly, rather than just hearing about it. Ultimately, engagement isn't about forcing attention, but about creating an environment where curiosity thrives. By recognizing that students respond to the conditions you cultivate, you empower them to become active participants in their own learning journey. The heart and community of teaching. Teaching often starts with passion, but without active care for your inner self, it can gradually deplete your energy and joy. Many educators begin their careers fueled by idealism and enthusiasm, only to find themselves slowly drifting away from what first inspired them. This isn't just about physical exhaustion, it's about preserving the spirit and purpose that give your teaching its vitality in a profession that demands so much of you. The path to renewal starts with acknowledging that your inner life matters deeply to your teaching practice. When Fatima noticed her enthusiasm for literature fading, she didn't seek solutions in new teaching techniques. Instead, she reconnected with her own love of reading, setting aside time each day to simply enjoy books again. This simple act of reconnection revitalized her teaching and re-energized her classroom presence. Sustaining your teaching spirit often comes down to small, meaningful habits. Malik, for instance, starts each day by reflecting on a student who has shown growth. This brief ritual helps him stay connected to the deeper purpose of his work, even on the toughest days. However, renewal isn't just an individual process, it flourishes in community. Too often, teachers shut their classroom doors and bear their challenges in isolation. Maya changed this dynamic by organizing a monthly dinner group where teachers could openly share their struggles and successes. These conversations reminded everyone that they weren't alone. What felt like personal failure was often a shared challenge, and working together made those challenges more manageable. Teacher communities can do more than provide emotional support. They foster growth. When Kai invited colleagues to observe his classes and offer feedback, the collaborative dialogue that followed helped everyone grow. Soon, other teachers began opening their doors too, creating a culture of shared learning and mutual support. Building a teaching community doesn't have to be complicated. Start small. Invite a trusted colleague to exchange classroom visits or create a casual group where teachers can share their experiences openly. These aren't just venting sessions or support groups. They're incubators for better teaching. Remember that sustainable teaching requires both inner work and outer connection. When Sarah felt overwhelmed, her teaching circle helped her rediscover her sense of purpose. Together, they explored not just what they taught, but why they taught, deepening their collective commitment to education. Teaching asks you to give your heart to your students. Taking care of that heart isn't selfish, it's essential. And by nurturing both your inner life and your connections with fellow teachers, you create the conditions for authentic learning to flourish in your classroom and beyond. In this Blink 2, The Courage to Teach, by Parker Palmer, you've learned that great teaching flows from authenticity. Your willingness to bring your whole self into the classroom transforms both teaching and learning. While teaching inherently involves emotional vulnerability, this challenge can become your greatest tool for connection when embraced. Rather than positioning yourself as the sole expert, create space for collaborative exploration, where both you and your students gather around the subject with genuine curiosity. Student engagement often reflects not their capabilities, but the learning environment we create. And this environment flourishes when we nurture both our inner lives and our connections with fellow teachers. By combining personal renewal with the power of the teacher community, we create the conditions where authentic learning can thrive across entire schools. Okay, that's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next Blink.